March 17, 1943. Under the top secret classification, in room 76 to 78 of the Berlin headquarters, an event unfolded that shook the very walls of the Abwehr. A folder of intelligence reports crashed onto the polished mahogany desk, and hot coffee from Admiral Wilhelm Canaris. His delicate porcelain cup spilled onto secret documents, whose discovery by the Gestapo would have inevitably led to severe retribution. This cannot be. The Americans are trying to feed us disinformation through their agents of influence, the Admiral exclaimed, disbelieving his own eyes. From the vast windows of the Abwehr headquarters, a view opened onto the Landwehr Canal, where Rosa Luxemburg's life had ended a quarter-century earlier. Now, in the hands of Germany's head of military intelligence, was a report that called into question not only Nazi propaganda slogans, but also the fundamental tenets of German military strategy. According to intercepted radio messages and agent reports from Mexico City, the Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant was producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour at an incredible speed. The B-24 Liberator was an intricate design, comprising 1.5 million parts fastened by 450,000 rivets, including 30,000 individual components and assemblies. This 18-ton aerial giant rolled off the assembly line faster than German industry could produce the unpretentious Kübelwagen military vehicle. Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz, standing perfectly still before the Admiral's desk, had personally triple-checked the intelligence. Yet the numbers remained undeniable. At that moment, none of them realized they were witnessing the beginning of the most devastating failure in the history of modern warfare intelligence operations. This refers to the systematic inability of German intelligence services to comprehend, believe, and convey to the highest Nazi leadership the true scale of the United States industrial might. This fatal error predetermined the collapse of the Third Reich in the face of an unyielding mathematical reality. The failure of German intelligence to assess American industrial potential had begun 2 years earlier. In 1941, Luftwaffe General Karl Kohler presented Hermann Göring with reports received from military attaché General Friedrich von Boerticher in Washington. These documents claim that the American aviation industry was reaching a production level of approximately 2,000 aircraft per month. Göring, meeting this information with outright laughter, declared that Americans were only capable of producing refrigerators and razor blades, but certainly not combat aircraft. "The Americans are bluffing," Göring told Hitler at the Wolf's Lair in December 1941, just 4 days after the tragedy at Pearl Harbor. "Their democratic system makes them vulnerable. Their multinational population reduces their effectiveness. Jewish influence corrupts them. They are utterly incapable of producing what they claim." By spring 1943, the German intelligence network spread across America began reporting information that contradicted the established notions of Nazi racial doctrine and economic views. Information arrived from diverse sources: Mexican entrepreneurs sympathetic to Germany, Spanish diplomats, Swedish businessmen traveling through Detroit, and even intercepted letters from American workers addressed to relatives in neutral countries. All converged on one incredible assertion: Ford's Willow Run plant alone was producing more heavy bombers than all of Germany's aircraft factories combined. Oberstleutnant Nikolaus Ritter, who headed the Abwehr's Air Intelligence Department, Fremde Luftwaffen, spent 3 weeks meticulously analyzing the incoming data. As a former Lufthansa pilot who had spent 10 years in America before the war, Ritter understood the United States' industrial potential better than many German officers. In the 1920s, his Manhattan apartment windows overlooked the construction of the Chrysler Building. He had witnessed Americans erect the world's tallest building in less than 2 years. Within the highest echelons of the German Navy, an ominous forecast was brewing. Admiral Ritter reported to Canaris, "If the presented data is accurate, and I have no reason to doubt its authenticity, then Germany's fate in this war is sealed. All that remains is to await the inevitable, for it is a matter of time and relentless mathematics." The information reaching the Admiral forged its path through complex and risky routes. Georg Nikolaus, the experienced head of a key Abwehr network based in Mexico City, skillfully established contacts with American entrepreneurs who regularly traveled between Detroit and Mexico's rich oil fields. These businessmen, unaware of the hidden danger, casually shared their impressions and observations, not realizing that their informal table conversations were being meticulously recorded by German agents. On February 3, 1943, a reception was held in Mexico City within the German-Mexican Trade Association, attended by American oil magnate Harold Morrison. Under the influence of a considerable amount of tequila, Morrison enthusiastically recounted his recent tour of the Willow Run plant. This tour had been organized by Ford to demonstrate the facility's impressive capabilities in fulfilling government contracts to potential investors. In one of the reception rooms, where the fates of the world were being decided, Morrison, unaware that his words were being absorbed by Wolfgang Blau, a German spy disguised as an Argentine businessman, began his story. What he had seen, he claimed, surpassed all imagination. Before him was a conveyor line stretching for many miles and a building so colossal that clouds formed inside it, occasionally raining. 42,000 workers toiled in this giant factory, including thousands of women, among them African American women, engaged in creating the most complex machine ever seen by humankind. Morrison, engrossed in his narrative, grabbed a pencil and began sketching a diagram on a simple napkin. The bomber, he explained, had 2 bomb bays, each capable of holding up to 4,000 pounds of explosives. 4 powerful engines, each delivering 200 horsepower, provided it with incredible speed and payload capacity. Production was organized on the principle of assembling individual sections, which Ford called sub-assemblies, much like rivers merging into a single mighty current. Wing sections arrive from one direction, fuselages from another, and tail sections from a third. All converged at strictly defined points along the conveyor line, forming a complete unit. Blau, striving to maintain a casual demeanor, inquired whether such complex processes led to frequent breakdowns and production delays. Morrison merely laughed in response. He reminded Blau that Consolidated Aircraft had initially been skeptical of Ford's idea, claiming that planes could not be built like cars. However, Ford had managed to break down the bomber assembly process into 60,000 individual operations. Each worker performed the same task repeatedly, honing their skill to perfection. A woman who had been preparing breakfast for her children yesterday was today deftly installing hydraulic lines in the aircraft's tail. Training took only a few days, not months, as was previously the norm. Perhaps the most comprehensive intelligence seeped through Spain, led by Francisco Franco. Colonel José Hungría, serving as the Spanish military attaché in Washington, maintained trusted connections with American aircraft manufacturers. Secretly, he transmitted intelligence to Germany in exchange for tungsten supplies vital for Spanish industry. In March 1943, Hungría attended a reception at the Argentine embassy, where he had the opportunity to meet Charles Sorensen, head of Ford's production department and the visionary behind the Willow Run plant. Sorensen, confident he was conversing with a representative of a neutral power, a potential buyer of aircraft after the war, freely shared the information about the plant's capabilities. "Colonel," Sorensen stated, unaware that his every word would reach Berlin within 2 weeks. "When I first visited Consolidated's San Diego plant in 1940, they were assembling B-24s outdoors, under the blazing sun, and each one was different from the last, taking 180,000 man-hours to build. I knew we could do better." The Hungarian engineer Hungría persisted, demanding details and explaining it as his professional interest as a military specialist. Sorensen, brimming with pride over his achievement, readily agreed. "One night in a hotel room in San Diego, I sketched out the entire production process. We would build bombers on the automobile production principle. Instead of workers gathering around a stationary aircraft, we would move the aircraft along a line of stationary workers. Each worker would perform a specific set of tasks repeatedly, perfecting their skill through repetition. The Spaniard inquired if there would be labor force issues with such production complexity. We've established a training center where 8,000 workers are trained weekly," Sorensen replied. "Women make up 40% of our workforce. They excel over men in intricate work thanks to their smaller hands, which allow them to reach difficult places and greater patience for monotonous tasks. We have African American workers operating complex equipment. We also have 16-year-old youths responsible for logistics. Democracy, Colonel, means utilizing all available human resources. Through Swedish, Argentine, Japanese and Turkish channels, German intelligence relentlessly received confirmation of Willow Run's impressive production rates. In March 1943, Swedish engineer Erik Lundberg, who visited the plant, reported, "The plant operates with an efficiency that surpasses European understanding. It has 1,600 specialized machines, many designed for a single operation. Capital investment is colossal, possibly reaching $200 million just for tooling." Independent confirmation also came from Japanese commander Toshikazu Omi in an encrypted message to Tokyo, intercepted by German intelligence. "This single plant produces more aircraft per month than the entire Japanese aviation industry." By April 1943, German intelligence had accumulated exhaustive data from 17 independent sources confirming the scale of production. The figures were astounding. Willow Run alone at its peak produced 650 B-24 bombers per month, and overall American production of these aircraft exceeded 1,400 units monthly. June saw Admiral Canaris's desperate attempts to obtain direct confirmation from the United States, leading to the launch of Operation Pastorius. This operation involved the clandestine deployment of a group of saboteurs to American soil using a submarine. One of the two four-man teams was led by George John Dash, a man who had spent 2 decades in America before returning to Germany just before 1939. His secret instructions, received personally from Canaris, mandated gathering intelligence on the scale of American aircraft production before undertaking any acts of sabotage. Early in the morning of June 13, 1942, Dash's group landed on the coast of Amagansett, Long Island. They secretly infiltrated the shore from the U-202 submarine shortly after midnight. However, just a few days later, tormented by the moral dilemmas of his mission and the realization of America's enormous industrial potential, Dash decided to surrender to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. During interrogations, Dash revealed information that astonished his American captors. He stated, "Canaris himself admitted to me that the High Command in Berlin distrusted your production capacity figures. They believed the information about the Willow Run plant was merely propaganda. He needed photographs, precise personnel data, supply reports, irrefutable evidence that would force Goering to acknowledge the reality." A tense silence hung in the room as FBI Special Agent Charles Landman, with doubt in his voice, uttered, "Do they really refuse to believe we can produce a bomber every hour?" In response, Dash merely gave a bitter chuckle. "Agent Landman, believe me, I know American industry firsthand. I've seen your car factories churn out vehicles. I tried to convey a simple idea to them. If Ford could produce a car every minute before the war, then producing a bomber every hour during wartime is well within their capabilities." But my words were dismissed as defeatist sentiment. On April 20th, 1943, Adolf Hitler's 54th birthday, Admiral Canaris personally presented the compiled intelligence to Hermann Goering at his luxurious hunting estate, Karinhall, north of Berlin. This meeting subsequently became legendary among German intelligence officers, who were astonished by Goering's complete rejection of obvious facts. Canaris presented Goering with irrefutable evidence, photographs, intercepted documents, and reports from numerous independent sources. He laid them out on the Reichsmarschall's massive oak table, like a croupier dealing cards foretelling an inevitable loss. "Herr Reichsmarschall," Canaris began cautiously, "we have confirmation from 17 independent sources indicating that the Ford Willow Run plant at peak production is producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour. This rate has been consistent since January." The corpulent Goering, whose body mass by then exceeded 280 pounds, appeared in the room. He casually picked up one of the photographs, depicting a conveyor line stretching into the distance, and mockingly addressed Canaris. "Do you really think I'm that stupid, Canaris? These are obviously wooden mock-ups created for propaganda. The Americans are trying to convince us of their ability to mass-produce aircraft like sausages. This Willow Run plant apparently produces no more than 50 bombers a month." Canaris, maintaining his composure, produced another document, an intercepted Pennsylvania Railroad manifest indicating enormous aluminum shipments. "Herr Reichsmarschall, this plant consumes 16 million pounds of aluminum monthly. That exceeds our entire monthly production." In response, Goering burst into loud laughter. "And where do you suppose they get this aluminum? Perhaps they smelt it from their African-American workers or women riveters. Canaris, you've fallen victim to American propaganda." A week later, Canaris was summoned to the Wolf's Lair for a personal report to Hitler. Generals Jodl and Keitel, as well as propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, were present at the meeting. Hitler focused on studying maps of the Eastern Front, where the Wehrmacht was preparing for Operation Citadel, the massive Battle of Kursk. Listened to Canaris' intelligence presentation with barely concealed impatience. The head of German military intelligence, Admiral Canaris, aware of the immense risk, conveyed disheartening data to the Führer. He emphasized that the colossal scale of American aircraft production, reaching 14200 B-24 bombers monthly, combined with similar B-17 output, fighter production and British capacity, would inevitably lead to a situation where airstrikes on the Reich would overwhelm German defenses. Hitler's reaction was predictably dismissive. The Führer declared that Americans had undoubtedly succeeded in the mass production of simple goods, such as automobiles and refrigerators. But a bomber was a fundamentally different product, requiring high precision, skill, and dedication. He expressed doubt that Americans could have achieved such production figures in such a short time, while Germany had required 6 years to prepare for war. General Jodl, having analyzed the figures presented by Canaris, attempted to convey a realistic assessment of the situation to the Führer. However, Hitler categorically rejected this data, stating that the Americans had only entered the war in December 1941, and building a miracle factory and establishing such large-scale production in such a short period was simply impossible. The head of the Abwehr, Admiral Canaris, thanks to his connections with American intelligence in Switzerland, managed to obtain newsreel footage of the Willow Run plant, a fact that remained a secret from the Nazi high command. The 5-minute film, smuggled through Spanish diplomatic channels, captured the functioning assembly line. Canaris and his deputy, Hans Oster, watched these frames in the strictest secrecy at Abwehr headquarters. The camera dispassionately glided along the mile-long assembly line, demonstrating B-24s at various stages of production. Workers of different races and genders, like mechanisms, performed their tasks with impeccable precision. The time, captured on clocks in several frames, confirmed the authenticity of what was happening. "Unbelievable," Oster whispered, stunned. Canaris, without losing his composure, destroyed the film, watching it turn to ash. "We cannot show this to them," he declared. "They will accuse us of forgery or treason." In November 1943, aerial photographs of Willow Run, taken by a Spanish diplomat, fell into the hands of German intelligence. Analysts painstakingly studied the images for several weeks. The results of the analysis spoke for themselves. Parking lots filled with approximately 12,000 cars indicated round-the-clock 3-shift operation. At the adjacent airfield, 47 B-24s were visible, ready for shipment. The assembly line, visible through skylights, showed aircraft positioned in strict accordance with previously obtained data. Railway tracks were jammed with dozens of freight cars delivering necessary materials. Expert Hedman Vernard concluded, "Photographic evidence fully confirms the data received from the agent network. Production rates appear credible. Immediate strategic reconsideration is strongly recommended." However, Göring, to whom these photographs were presented, dismissed them, calling them a clever American falsification, possibly using scale models. Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, and perhaps the only member of the Nazi leadership who truly understood the intricacies of industrial production, had access to secret American intelligence data. His diary entry from May 15, 1943, discovered after the war, reveals his despair. "If even half of the figures for the Willow Run plant are accurate, we face not just defeat, but total annihilation. They are producing more planes in a month than we are in a year. But I cannot speak openly about this. It would be tantamount to signing my own death warrant. Meanwhile, Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, who headed the SD in land and possessed a strong economic background, meticulously studied the economic indicators of the United States. His report, presented to Himmler in December 1943, was disheartening. In peacetime, 1941, the Ford Motor Company produced 1.1 million automobiles. These capacities are now reoriented towards bomber production, and the pace of output is constantly increasing. By June 1944, the Americans will have enough B-24s to drop a tonnage of bombs on us daily, equivalent to what was dropped on London in 1940. During the Christmas period of 1943, Admiral Canaris, head of German military intelligence, received alarming information about the American aviation industry's production plans for the upcoming year, 1944. According to this data, the United States planned to produce a colossal number of combat aircraft: 18,000 B-24 Liberator bombers, 12,000 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers, 1,000 of the new B-29 Super Fortress, and approximately 40,000 fighters of various types. The total production volume was projected to be an impressive 86,000 aircraft. When these figures were presented to Adolf Hitler, his reaction was one of skepticism and disbelief. The Führer declared that the Americans were merely boasting and that they could not possibly produce more aircraft in 1944 than all countries combined had produced in the entire history of aviation. He dismissed these claims as absurd, refusing to believe in the reality of the aerial threat looming over Germany. However, reality was becoming increasingly apparent. By February 1944, Canaris had been dismissed from his post on suspicion of defeatism and even treason. His place was taken by Walter Schellenberg, a convinced Nazi who would not dare to contradict Hitler or Goering. But even loyalty could not conceal the truth. On February 20th, 1944, Operation Argument, also known as Big Week, began, during which the US 8th Air Force unleashed its full might on German aircraft factories. More than 1,000 heavy bombers launched massive attacks, dropping more tons of bombs in 6 days than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Great Britain during the entire Blitz. It became clear that Germany was facing an air war of unprecedented scale, and denying it was no longer possible. In the history of World War II, there are episodes that vividly demonstrate a turning point in the course of events. Luftwaffe fighter pilot Adolf Galland reported in despair to Goering about the unprecedented power of the Allied air forces. Herr Reichsmarschall, I personally counted over 800 bombers in battle formation, and these are not training targets, they are dropping real bombs. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, over 11,000 Allied aircraft filled the skies over France. The Luftwaffe could only muster a mere 300 fighters against this armada. Field Marshal Hugo Sperle, realizing the catastrophic situation, sent a message to Berlin full of bitterness and disappointment. The enemy's air superiority is absolutely overwhelming. Our intelligence was correct. But it wasn't the Americans who deceived us, it was ourselves, our own illusions. By April 1944, the Willow Run plant had reached its peak production capacity. Working 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week, the workforce churned out 453 aircraft per month, meaning one completed B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. The plant employed 42,231 people, including 11,000 women, 26% of the total workforce, 3,800 African Americans, about 9%, and 1,200 people with disabilities, 0.3%. This diverse and multicultural workforce, through its labor, delivered a devastating blow to Nazi racial ideology. inferior races and weak segments of the population outproduced the German master race many times over, proving the fallacy of racist theories in practice. After the end of World War II, surviving German intelligence officers shed light on the catastrophic scale of the errors made. Walter Schellenberg, testifying at the Nuremberg trials, stated that as early as the beginning of 1943, German intelligence possessed accurate data on American industrial potential. He emphasized that any professional intelligence officer recognized the reliability of these figures, but reporting the truth up the chain of command was tantamount to a death sentence for defeatist sentiments. Hans Bernd Gisevius, in his memoirs, bitterly noted that the problem was not a lack of information about American industry, but rather an abundance of it. The tragedy was that Germany's top leadership refused to believe this data because it contradicted their racial beliefs and ideological dogmas. German intelligence officers who dared to report truthful information paid a terrible price. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, was executed on April 9, 1945, at Flossenbürg concentration camp. Hans Oster suffered the same fate, also executed on April 9, 1945, at Flossenbürg. Alexis von Roener was executed in October 1944 for his involvement in the July 20th plot against Hitler. Only Hans Bernd Gisevius managed to escape this tragic fate, fleeing to Switzerland and surviving the war. The US Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed what German intelligence had previously reported, revealing the impressive scale of production at the Willow Run plant. Between 1942 and 1945, 8,685 B-24 bombers were produced there, with peak production reaching 650 aircraft per month. Notably, this rate of output was sustained for several months. Thanks to process optimization, the total cost of a single aircraft significantly decreased from $238,000 to $137,000. During his post-war interrogation, Albert Speer was asked why Germany did not trust intelligence data regarding American production. His answer revealed the deeply ingrained prejudices of the Nazi regime. To admit that Ford could produce a bomber every hour would have meant acknowledging the fallacy of our entire worldview. It would have meant admitting that democracy is not weak but strong, that racial mixing creates not weakness but strength, that women are capable of performing men's work. Ultimately, it would have meant admitting that we started a war we were destined to lose. But who would have dared to tell that to Hitler? Rose Will Monroe, who became the real-life prototype for Rosie the Riveter, worked with a rivet gun on the B-24 production line. She and thousands of other women who previously had no industrial experience came to the factories after the tragic events at Pearl Harbor. We knew we were building something extremely important, Monroe recalled in a 1984 interview. Every rivet we installed was meant to bring the war closer to an end. Often we worked 2 shifts, finding rest in the parking lot between them. Our brothers, husbands and loved ones flew in these planes, and we knew we were contributing to their safety and victory. Collapse on the horizon, Nazi Germany's tragic miscalculations based on underestimating American industrial might. The refusal to acknowledge the veracity of intelligence information about the Willow Run aircraft plant, a giant symbol of American industrial might, led to a series of catastrophic consequences for Nazi Germany. This short-sightedness, like a veil, blinded the German leadership, pushing the country towards inevitable collapse. First, Germany continued to increase bomber production until late 1944. ignoring the fact that their efforts paled in comparison to the American aircraft torrent. Second, resources that could have been directed towards strengthening defenses were recklessly squandered on developing wonder weapons that ultimately failed to live up to expectations. Third, strategic planning was based on the illusory notion of confronting hundreds of bombers, while thousands of American aircraft already dominated the skies. Finally, diplomatic initiatives aimed at seeking peace were constantly postponed due to a misunderstanding of the impending catastrophe, which only worsened Germany's position on the international stage. German economists, upon gaining access to captured documents, were stunned by the true scale of the American industrial giant. The Willow Run plant, valued at $200 million, overshadowed the entire German aviation industry, which had received only $400 million in investment from 1933 to 1945. Willow Run's area was 3.5 million square feet, while the total area of all German aircraft factories combined did not exceed 8 million square feet. Willow Run's electricity consumption reached 2.5 million kilowatt per month, demonstrating its colossal production capacity. These figures became a bitter revelation, vividly illustrating the chasm between the industrial capabilities of Germany and the United States, and foreshadowed the inevitable collapse of the Third Reich. During World War II, American industry reached unprecedented scales, astounding with its production volumes. A single factory built by the Americans consumed more resources than entire German cities. By the end of the war, when the final tally was made, the true extent of production became evident. A total of 188 B-24 bombers were produced, with 8,685 of them rolling off the assembly line at the Willow Run plant. B-17 bomber production reached 12,131 units. Between 1940 and 1945, American industry produced a total of 33,717 aircraft. In comparison, Germany produced 94,700 aircraft during the same period. Thus, the United States, fighting on two oceans, managed to produce 3.2 times more aircraft than Germany. Historians consider the failure of German intelligence to assess America's production capabilities as one of the most serious miscalculations in military history. Notably, this was not a failure in information gathering. German agents obtained accurate and detailed intelligence. The problem lay in the leadership's inability to accept this data because it contradicted their established worldview. Dr. Gerhard Weinberg concluded that German intelligence had accurately assessed the US production potential by early 1943. Had this intelligence been taken into account and appropriate actions taken based on it, Germany could have initiated peace negotiations 2 years earlier, thereby saving millions of human lives. This tragic story offers us several important lessons, still relevant today. First, it demonstrates how cognitive biases can blind reason, leading to the rejection of even the most accurate intelligence data if it conflicts with established beliefs. Second, ideological blindness can obscure rational thought when political dogmas are prioritized over harsh mathematical reality. Third, systemic failures in intelligence structures, where inconvenient truths are not encouraged, but rather falsehoods are rewarded, lead to catastrophic consequences. And finally, the fatal miscalculation of underestimating an adversary inevitably leads to tragedy and immense losses. In 1985, a significant encounter took place at the grand opening of the Yankee Air Museum at Willow Run. Rose Will Monroe, a former aircraft factory worker who went down in history as the symbol of American labor, Rosie the Riveter, met with Hans Rudel, once a renowned Luftwaffe pilot. Rudel, astonished by the scale of American military industry, asked Monroe, "How did you manage to build so many planes so quickly?" Monroe, with a modest smile, replied, "Honey, we just came to work every day and did our job. Nothing special. We just built bombers and went home. Democracy isn't rocket science. It's just free people doing everything they can." Rudel, deep in thought, uttered, "We were taught that democracy made you weak, that your diversity made you inefficient. We were lied to, and that lie cost millions of lives." In May 1945, as Berlin lay in ruins, American intelligence officers stumbled upon an ominous find, Germany's final intelligence report on the Willow Run plant, dated April 20, 1945, Adolf Hitler's birthday. In this report, like a cry of despair, it is stated, "Production at Willow Run is confirmed. We tried to convey this truth 2 years ago, but our voices went unheard." Germany is perishing not from a lack of information, but from an unwillingness to believe what contradicts our prejudices. May future generations learn this lesson. Reality does not yield to ideology. Mathematics does not submit to mythology, and ignoring the truth leads to tragedy. This report never reached its intended recipient. Hitler, confined to his bunker, refused to see the impending catastrophe. The 1,000-year Reich was living its final days, and thousands of American bombers, many having rolled off the Willow Run assembly line, delivered the final irrefutable argument that German intelligence had unsuccessfully tried to convey to the country's leadership for 2 years. History delivered its harsh verdict. German intelligence acted impeccably, but the acceptance of its data proved catastrophic. In this tragic unwillingness to believe inconvenient truths lies a serious warning for all nations. Reality cares nothing for our beliefs. Those who deny it for the sake of their ideological dogmas are doomed to perish. Willow Run produced more than just bombers. It created living proof that democracy is effective, diversity is a source of strength, and freedom fosters prosperity. German spies meticulously tallied all the facts, but German leaders chose not to believe them. And that disbelief destroyed the Third Reich, just as surely as any bomb dropped from an American aircraft.